My name is Valerie Brooks. I gave 20 years of my life to a top consultancy company in Atlanta. I showed up early, stayed late, skipped vacations, trained the interns, even covered for my boss's mistakes. All because I believed loyalty still mattered. But just 2 days before I was supposed to receive my full pension, they fired me. No warning. No thank you. Just a cold, quiet dismissal. They thought they won. But I made a call. And that call changed everything. You might want to sit down for this one. Where are you watching from? Have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted? Drop your story in the comments. Let's talk. 2 days. That's all I had left. Just 2 days, and I could finally breathe. That was the thought running through my head as I pulled into the Strat-Edge consultancy parking lot that Monday morning. I was 45 years old, and after 20 years of loyal service, my pension was finally about to vest. I parked in my usual spot, third from the front, under the only tree that gave a little shade. I sipped my vanilla latte and smiled. My heart felt light for the first time in months. 2 more days and I'd be free. Free to rest. Free to wake up whenever I wanted. Free to finally open my dream bakery. I'd already picked the name, Butter and Grace. Simple. Sweet. Like the cookies I used to bake with my mama. I walked into the building with a small bounce in my step. My coworkers greeted me with polite nods, but something felt different. You ever feel like people are smiling at you but not really smiling for you? That's what it felt like. It wasn't loud, but I could hear soft whispers behind cubicle walls. Some people looked away when I walked by. Others gave me that weird look. You know, the kind you give someone when you know something they don't? I brushed it off. Maybe I was imagining it. Maybe they were just stressed from Monday deadlines. Maybe I was just excited and sensitive at the same time. But then I passed by Martin's office. He was my boss for the last 6 years. We didn't always see eye to eye, but we had mutual respect. Or so I thought. Normally, he'd wave or at least give me a morning, Valerie. But this time, he didn't even lift his head. Just kept tapping away at his keyboard like I didn't exist. Strange. Till I shook it off. 2 more days, I whispered under my breath and sat at my desk. I logged in, pulled up my emails and glanced at the countdown I had taped to the corner of my monitor. Pension vesting. 2 days left. I smiled to myself. I was almost there. Around 10:45 a.m. the new intern Kayla came bustling in with a stack of papers and 2 phones clutched to her chest. She looked flustered, like someone who was just told to print out a 100-page document 10 minutes before a meeting. She rushed past my desk, and as she did, one of the pages slipped from her folder and glided to the floor right beside my chair. "Kayla," I called gently, "you dropped something." But she was already down the hallway. I bent down to pick it up. And that's when my breath caught in my throat. "Severance packages, for pension list." That was the title on the top of the page. In bold black letters. I froze. I scanned the page quickly and my eyes locked onto the very first name. Valerie Brooks. My name. There it was. Clear as day. Right next to the words. Scheduled termination. Friday 4:58 p.m. 2 minutes before the close of business. 2 minutes before my pension would legally vest. My heart started pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I blinked. Once. Twice. Maybe this was some kind of mistake. Maybe there was another Valerie Brooks. Maybe. Miss Valerie? Kayla's voice startled me. She had doubled back and was now standing over me, smiling awkwardly. "Sorry, I think I dropped something." I quickly folded the paper and handed it to her. "Here you go." She took it without a second glance and walked off, completely unaware of the bomb she had just dropped in my lap. I sat frozen in my chair. Everything around me went blurry. The keyboards clicking, the phones ringing, even the coffee smell I usually loved. All I could see was that list. My name on it. For 20 years I gave them everything. I stayed late. Came in early. Trained new staff. Solved client crises. I was the calm in the storm. I once worked through a flu just to finish a proposal that landed us a $3 million contract. And this was how they repaid me. They were going to fire me. 2 minutes before I earned the money I'd worked 2 decades for? My stomach turned. I looked around the office and suddenly, it all made sense. The whispers. The silence. Martin not looking at me. The strange meeting Kayla rushed into earlier. They all knew. They were going to blindside me. Fire me. Cut me off. Walk me out of that building before I even realized what happened. And the worst part? They probably thought I'd never find out. That I'd just smile and work until the last minute, and then disappear. But now I knew. And everything had changed. I left the office at exactly 5 p.m., my face calm but my heart in knots. I didn't speak to anyone. I just walked to my car, got in, closed the door, and stared at the steering wheel. My fingers gripped it tight as I whispered. I wasn't supposed to see that list, but my name was at the top. And that's when it hit me. I only had 2 days. 2 days, to fight back. To make a move. To flip the script before they erased me from it. What would you do if you saw your name on that list? Would you confront your boss? Pretend you didn't see it? Or start planning your revenge? Tell me in the comments. Is what I did next. Let's just say, it started with a phone call. And ended with something no one in that office saw coming. And they waited until everyone left. The clock on the wall read 4:30 p.m. when I felt my phone buzz in my purse. I had been pacing the parking lot for what seemed like hours, trying to calm myself, trying to figure out my next move. Valerie, please come to the conference room, the message read. My heart sank. There was no reason for me to be called into a meeting this late, especially after the bombshell I'd learned earlier. I stood frozen for a moment, the weight of everything hitting me like a freight train. I knew what this was. They were going to fire me. But why wait until everyone else was gone? Why not just pull me aside earlier? This isn't personal, Valerie. I could already hear Martin's voice in my head. I didn't bother replying to the text. I just started walking, each step heavier than the last. As I passed the empty cubicles, I could almost feel the ghosts of the many years I'd spent in this place. It had been my second home for 2 decades. But now it was just a hollow shell. When I entered the conference room, the door clicked shut behind me with an almost ceremonial finality. The lights were dimmed and the room was cold, just like the atmosphere. Martin sat at the head of the table, his arms crossed, his usual confident posture gone. Beside him was Susan from HR, her expression impassive as if she'd practiced this moment for years. And standing by the door? 2 security guards standing like statues, eyes watching me. I froze in the doorway. Valerie, Martin's voice was a little too smooth, please take a seat. I sat down slowly, eyes flicking between the 3 of them, trying to keep my composure. The tension in the room was suffocating. There was a long pause before Martin finally spoke again. We've been doing a lot of restructuring lately and we've had to make some difficult decisions. As part of that process, we've come to the conclusion that your position at StratEdge Consultancy is no longer needed. Restructuring, I whispered under my breath. I had heard that term thrown around in corporate offices more times than I could count. It was the go-to excuse when companies wanted to get rid of someone but couldn't say the real reason. They were just getting rid of you. Martin leaned forward, his fingers tapping the table lightly. This isn't personal, Valerie. It's just business. I clenched my jaw. I had to control my emotions. I had to. Susan, sitting beside Martin, cleared her throat. She slid a folder across the table toward me. I didn't want to look at it, but I had to. The words on the top of the first page were bold and clear. Severance package. I opened the folder, my hands shaking. Inside was a printed document with terms that made my stomach churn. They were offering me a basic severance package, just enough to cover the next few months while I looked for something new. I felt the floor beneath me shift. I was in shock, but I couldn't let them see that. There was no mention of the pension I'd worked for 20 years to earn. Nothing about the 2 days I had left. I looked up at Martin, my voice tight but calm. Is this it? He didn't flinch. Unfortunately, yes. My pulse quickened. This wasn't right. There had to be more. There had to be some mistake. I had worked my heart out for them. But then Susan spoke again, and her next words were like a slap to the face. If you refuse the severance, you won't receive anything. Everything went still. I stared at her. Refuse it? Refuse what? Why was I being given an ultimatum like this, with no warning and only 2 days to fight for what was rightfully mine? They wanted me to sign the papers, to just accept the bare minimum and walk out with nothing more than a handshake. I glanced at the two security guards again, standing silently in the corner. I didn't know what they were planning, but the weight of their presence made it clear that my options were limited. I looked back at Martin. He knew. He knew that I was cornered. He knew that if I refused, I would have no choice but to walk away empty-handed. The silence in the room was deafening as I processed everything. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, and for a moment I wondered if I was going to explode right there. My hand hovered over the paper. The severance. The offer. The ultimatum. I closed my eyes for a moment. My mind raced. Was this it? Was I going to just take it? Was I going to sign my name on that dotted line and walk out with nothing but a worthless paycheck and an empty future? I thought of the bakery. Of butter and grace. The dream that had kept me going for all these years. Was I going to let this company steal it all from me? Then a small voice inside me spoke up. You don't have to take it. You can fight. I slowly raised my head and stared straight at Martin, my resolve building. I'm not signing it, I said, my voice steady but firm. Martin's face faltered for just a second. The briefest flicker of surprise crossed his features. I could see it. He didn't think I'd have the guts to refuse. But he was wrong. The room went quiet again, and for the first time in 20 years I felt like I had the upper hand. You're making a huge mistake, Valerie, Martin said, his voice almost a whisper now. You don't want to do this. But I wasn't afraid anymore. We'll see. If you were in Valerie's shoes, would you sign the papers and walk away quietly, or would you fight for what's yours? Tell me in the comments below. And don't forget to stay tuned and subscribe to the channel because things are about to get a lot more complicated. I knew someone. And that someone owed me. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even slam the door when I got in my car. I just sat there for a long moment, gripping the steering wheel, letting the weight of what had just happened sink in. StratEdge Consultancy, the place I'd spent 2 decades pouring my heart into, had just shoved me out the door with nothing more than a severance offer meant to crush my dignity. But I wasn't broken. Not yet. I had one thing left, a phone number. The drive home was a blur. The usual evening traffic felt irrelevant, the city lights flickering like a backdrop to my internal storm. The world outside was spinning. The one thing I could control was the decision to pick up my phone and make that call. Monica Green. I hadn't spoken to her in over 5 years, but she was the first person who came to mind. We'd worked together once during a corporate audit scandal when I had saved her from getting caught up in something she didn't deserve. In return, she promised me that if I ever needed help, I could call on her. Monica had been sharp, ruthless even. And in the world of corporate law, you needed someone like her in your corner. I fumbled with my phone, scrolling through my old contacts list, stopping when I saw her name. A rush of relief swept over me, but I didn't hesitate. I pressed dial. The phone rang twice before she answered. Valerie. Monica's voice was as cool and professional as I remembered, but there was something warmer there, something that told me she remembered who I was. Monica, I said, trying to steady my voice. It's been a while. Too long, she replied with a chuckle. What's going on with you? I haven't heard your voice in forever. What can I do for you? I paused. For a moment, I considered dumping all my frustration, all my confusion on her. But no. That wouldn't help. Not yet. What I needed now was strategy. I need your help, I said, getting straight to the point. There was a silence on the other end of the line, but only for a moment. She was no stranger to corporate battles. What happened? She asked, her tone already shifting to business mode. I took a deep breath and told her everything. How I had worked for StratEdge Consultancy for 20 years, how I had been just 2 days away from receiving my pension when I was called into the conference room and handed a severance package. After everything I've done for them, they just want to throw me away, I finished, my voice cracking slightly. But I didn't let it go any further. Monica didn't rush to speak. Instead, she let the silence linger on her end of the line, listening. I could practically hear her mind working through the details. Then she spoke. Sounds like you've been set up for a cheap exit, she said, her voice colder than I'd ever heard it. But I have to ask, why come to me now? You know I don't deal with this kind of case anymore. I've moved into handling whistleblower cases for the past few years. I leaned back in my chair, rubbing my temples. He was right. She'd gone a different path since we last spoke. She had become well known in legal circles for protecting those who exposed corporate misconduct. I know you don't do these cases anymore, but you owe me, Monica, I said, the words coming out sharper than I intended. You remember the audit scandal, right? When I saved you from getting implicated in that mess. You told me then that if I ever needed help, you'd have my back. This is what I need help with. There was another pause. Then, just as I was about to speak again, Monica cut me off. I remember, she said softly, her voice shifting into a more serious tone. But Valerie, you've got to understand something. Taking on a case like yours, it's risky. You'll be fighting a well-established corporation with resources, and they won't just let you walk away. This could get ugly fast. I've been through ugly, Monica, I replied, my voice now stronger. And I've got nothing left to lose. They took everything from me. But if I can fight them, if I can make them pay for what they've done, I'll take my shot. Monica was quiet for a long time. She was weighing her options, and I could almost see the wheels turning in her mind. Finally she sighed. All right, she said with a resigned tone. Let me look into it. But Valerie, this is going to be a lot harder than you think. We're going up against some serious players here. My heart skipped a beat, but I kept my voice calm. I'm ready, I said, determination filling my chest. Then, just as I was about to thank her, Monica spoke again. Her voice was almost too calm, like she was making a prediction that I wasn't prepared for. She paused for 5 long seconds, and in that silence, I could feel the weight of what she was about to say. You might have just made their worst mistake your biggest payday. The words hung in the air like a promise, and I knew then that I wasn't just in a fight for my pension anymore. I was in a fight for something much bigger, something that could change everything. I didn't say anything for a long time. Monica didn't say anything either. We both knew that the real battle had just begun. What happens next? I asked quietly. Let me make a few calls, she replied. I'll get back to you. They thought I was just a loyal worker. They forgot I had receipts. Monica always said corporate cover-ups leave a trail. Paper, emails, casual voice notes. Somewhere someone always slips. And it turns out, StratEdge Consultancy wasn't as clean as their glossy brochures and company retreats suggested. We started the digging quietly. Late nights on secure calls. Encrypted email threads. Monica operated like a surgeon. Precise, cautious, and always 10 steps ahead. Me? Well, I knew the bones buried in that company. 20 years gives you a front row seat to all the little cracks no one else notices. It began with my old work laptop. StratEdge had asked for it back, but I'd had a backup system in place for years. Just to protect client files, I once told myself. But there was more. Notes from HR meetings. Performance reviews. Emails from Martin with weird, panicked subject lines like, "Need this handled quietly," and "delay payout discussion." I forwarded everything to Monica. The deeper we went, the darker it got. StratEdge had a history. Not just me. At least 9 other employees had been let go within 3 to 6 months of hitting their pension milestone. And every time the narrative was the same: restructuring, realignment, new direction. The names weren't random. They were methodical. Older employees. Higher salaries. People who wouldn't push back because they didn't have the energy to start over. Most of them just took the severance and disappeared quietly. But not me. Monica was stunned. "This isn't just unethical, it's a pattern," she whispered one night over a call. "Depending on how far this goes, it could border on fraud." So that wasn't enough. We needed something concrete. And that's when I remembered the folder. Tucked deep in my home office cabinet was an old black binder I'd kept for years. It held printed internal memos, emails I wasn't supposed to have, and voice notes from strategy meetings. Some of them recorded by accident on my phone during late-night Zoom calls with Martin. He had this habit of oversharing when he drank during meetings. One note, dated almost a year ago, stood out. "We'll never survive paying out all those pensions. Snip them early. Offer a package and move on." That wasn't just strategy. That was intent. I sent the file to Monica. The next morning she called. Her voice had a new edge to it. Valerie, what we found next, she said slowly. It could burn the whole company to the ground. I didn't ask what it was, yet. Her voice told me enough. This wasn't just about me anymore. Now we stood at a crossroads. Blow the whistle? Go public? Risk everything? Or settle quietly behind closed doors and walk away with a padded check? Monica made it clear. If you go public, they'll come hard. Smear campaigns, legal threats, NDA traps. But if you stay quiet and settle, this dies here. Forever. I sat in my kitchen that night, staring at the printed voice note transcript. Martin's words burned in my head. Snip them early. They thought I was just another quiet name on a spreadsheet. But I had lived every line on that paper. And now it was mine to use. I picked up my phone. My finger hovered over the call button for Monica. Whistleblower. Or walk away. You don't just fire someone like me and walk away clean. Monday morning came with a storm. Not outside. Emails buzzed. Phones rang. Messages came in with red urgency flags. I wasn't in the building, but I could feel the pulse from miles away. StratEdge Consultancy was in full damage control. Because Monica had pulled the trigger. She filed the legal complaint. The kind that doesn't just sit quietly on some dusty HR desk. It had teeth. It had evidence. And more importantly, it had names. By Wednesday, whispers turned into headlines. Consultancy giant accused of pension fraud. Whistleblower alleges strategic firings to avoid payouts. My phone vibrated with calls from reporters, ex-colleagues, even strangers on LinkedIn who were inspired and angry on my behalf. But I ignored them. Because one number I didn't expect did show up. Martin. He left a voicemail. Valerie, this is all a huge misunderstanding. I never meant for any of this to happen. Let's talk, please. I replayed the message twice. Then I deleted it. He knew exactly what he meant. And now so did the world. Monica warned me to expect their tricks. They'll come at you soft first. Apologies charm. Then it'll switch. Legal pressure, PR spins, character attacks. Be ready. I was. But then something unexpected happened. A message popped up from someone I barely remembered. Lena, the intern. Just a quiet face from the corner cubicle. Soft-spoken. Nervous. Hi, Miss Valerie, her text began. I know you probably don't remember me. I'm the one who dropped that file. I'm so sorry. But I think you need to see this. Attached were photos of more internal memos. One caught my breath. A scanned PDF, dated 3 months ago, titled, Pension Strategy Rollback, Phase 3. Initiated by Executive Office. Approved by Sylvia Wensley. That signature. Right there in blue ink. My stomach twisted. This wasn't just Martin. It wasn't just HR. It went straight to the top. I sent the file to Monica immediately. Her reply came fast. This changes everything. But it also meant the fight had just escalated. This wasn't just my story anymore. It was a war. That week I barely slept. Every beep of my phone felt like a landmine. Every ping of my email like a shadow creeping closer. People I hadn't spoken to in years were now suddenly reaching out. Stay strong. We always knew something was off. I think they did this to my dad too. Each message made the weight heavier. But there was no turning back. Monica went on TV Thursday night. Just 5 minutes on a small business news show. She didn't drop names. She didn't even say StratEdge directly. But she talked about a culture of systematic pension manipulation. And that was enough. By Friday morning, StratEdge stock dipped 11%. And then, another surprise. A courier delivered a thick, sealed envelope to my house. No return address. Just my name written in neat handwriting. Inside, printouts of internal Slack conversations. Managers laughing. Joking about who was next to get trimmed. Referring to me as the bakery queen, and saying I should be grateful for a severance at her age. At the bottom of one message I saw it again. De Wensley Ho. Just make it clean. She's old school. She won't fight. I closed the file slowly. They didn't just underestimate me. They forgot who I used to be. I spent 2 decades helping build that company, fixing their messes, cleaning up their audits, calming angry clients. Now I was their storm. I sent Monica a photo of the CEO's signature and typed one line. Let's go all the way. They thought I'd break. I smiled instead. I stepped into the courtroom wearing navy blue and quiet resolve. The press had tried to follow. Cameras weren't allowed inside, but I could feel their flashes burning outside the courthouse windows like artificial lightning. This wasn't about them. Not anymore. It was about the truth, and the people they discarded like broken office chairs. The courtroom felt colder than I expected. Not just in temperature, in tone. The Strat-Edge lawyers sat with clipped suits and sharper glances, their briefcases stacked like battle shields. Martin was there too. Hair less slicked than usual. Eyes shadowed. He didn't look at me. He hadn't since that Friday at 4:58 p.m. Monica opened with calm precision. She laid out the timeline. The patterns. The documents. The severance list. The CEO's signature. The Slack messages that mocked aging employees like me. Each slide on the screen behind her made the courtroom sit a little straighter. Then it was my turn. I walked to the witness stand, adjusted the mic, and cleared my throat. I gave them 20 years, I began. 20 years of late nights, of missed birthdays, of showing up when no one else would. I paused. And they repaid me by calling me the bakery queen, and firing me 2 days before my pension matured. A murmur floated through the courtroom. But I wasn't finished. One by one, others began to speak. Former staff I had reached out to quietly in the shadows of this storm. A man who worked in IT for 17 years, terminated at 19 years and 11 months. A woman from HR who'd signed dozens of pre-pension severances and finally admitted the discomfort that haunted her since. Each voice built the case. Each voice echoed my own pain. The judge, a stern woman with kind eyes, leaned forward during Monica's closing. These stories are not isolated incidents, Monica said, voice steady. They are calculated. Patterned. Corporate policy cloaked in silence. Then she dropped the hammer. We're requesting whistleblower protection and permission to initiate a class action lawsuit. You could feel the room tense. The judge looked down at the documents. Then back up. Her voice was clear. Granted. And that's when the real twist came. I turned back to the stand. I have one more thing, I said softly. Martin's head snapped up. I pulled a printed email from my folder. Dated 1 week before my firing. Sent at 2:14 a.m. Subject line. Clean sweep before Q4. Signed Martin himself. In it he listed my name, and 3 others, as cost burdens, to be removed before pension eligibility to ensure fiscal performance metrics are met. The silence after that wasn't just stillness. It was stunned. The kind of silence that carries weight. Gasps echoed across the room like dropped pins in an empty cathedral. Martin closed his eyes. The Strat-Edge lawyers whispered frantically. And I just sat there. Watching. Breathing. After the session ended, Monica leaned toward me and whispered, "We just cracked their shell." But I didn't smile. Not yet. Because we were only halfway through the war. Outside, the wind had picked up. A news reporter shouted my name. I walked past them all. Quietly. Because this wasn't about headlines. It was about dignity. And deep in my bag, zipped into a folder, was one more email. The worst one. The one I hadn't shown anyone. Yet. If they came to you now, apologized, and offered to fix it, would you forgive them? Or is there a line they already crossed? I'd love to hear your answer. This wasn't revenge. It was justice. The court ruling came on a rainy Thursday morning. The kind of rain that usually made people stay in bed, but not that day. I was already dressed, waiting by the window, watching each drop roll down the glass like time catching up with truth. The judge's voice, firm and echoing through the courtroom, still rings in my ears. Strat-Edge Consultancy is hereby ordered to pay damages equal to 3 times the plaintiff's pension, and to enter a formal restructuring supervised by a third-party ethics board. I didn't cry. Not right then. But when Monica hugged me outside the courthouse, warm and real and steady, I felt something break free inside me. I had made the call. And I had won. Martin resigned before the ink dried on the judgment. No press conference. No goodbye speech. Just an internal memo and an empty parking space the next morning. Some said he took a job overseas. Others said he'd never work in corporate again. I didn't really care. His chapter in my story was over. StratEdge tried to spin it, of course. They posted statements about learning from the past and rebuilding with integrity. But the world had already seen their shadow. And change wasn't optional anymore. It was court-mandated. They had no choice but to face themselves. The payout was more than I expected. Triple my pension. Enough to breathe. Enough to rest. Enough to begin. 3 months later, I opened Val's Hearth and Honey, right on the edge of the neighborhood I grew up in. Rustic wood shelves. Warm cinnamon in the air. A bell on the door that jingled like joy. Every morning I baked. Every afternoon I smiled. And every so often a former coworker would drop by, not for pity but for pastries and peace. "I never thought you'd actually do it," one of them said. "I did," I replied. "They just tried to make me forget." Once a month I slipped out of my apron and into a blazer. Monica had offered the position before the courtroom dust even settled. "Come help us make sure this never happens to anyone else," she said. Now I work with her team as a business ethics consultant, helping companies build better cultures before they rot from the inside out. Turns out, a woman who saw too much over 20 years knows exactly where the cracks usually start. And the intern? Her name was Dani. She showed up one morning after the trial with a nervous smile and a folder full of baking blogs bookmarked on her phone. "I don't know if you remember me," she began. "I do," I said. "You were brave when it counted." I offered her a part-time job right then. Now she runs the register with more confidence than I ever had at her age. She calls me Boss V, and insists on bringing new recipe ideas every Friday. She reminds me of myself, before the long meetings and the sharp betrayals. I don't hate StratEdge. I pity what it became. But I cherish what it taught me. Because justice isn't always loud. Sometimes, it rises in silence. In courtrooms and cinnamon rolls. In whispered thank yous from those who saw you stand tall. And maybe, just maybe, that's how healing begins. Where are you watching from? Have you ever seen injustice happen right before your eyes, and had to choose between staying silent or speaking out? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Would you have made the call? Don't forget to like, share, and follow for more stories that shake the soul and stir your strength. Because sometimes all it takes is one call to change everything.